this never would have happened, especially from the technical end, which I'm a complete klutz with. They were a great help. Danielle, Lauren and Laura, Melissa and Beth and Jennifer, and especially Jill Adams, who spent really quite a few hours with me assembling, putting this program together. I want to thank too Patrick Crotty, who's here tonight, for his help. He's the, I guess, the cemetery go-to guy, I guess, really, and a great photographer. And of course, Bert Montan, excuse me, who's the printer at Town Hall. He's been a great help. Well, we're going to start with the actual incorporation. I'm not going to read all that, believe me. But just briefly, it starts out with, at a General Assembly of the State of Connecticut, holding at New London on the second Thursday of October, 1801, upon the petition of Isaac Rogers. Now remember that guy's name. He is the father of Waterford. The others living in that part of town in New London, lying without the limits of the city of New London, showing to this assembly that a great part of the memorialists lives at a great distance from the place of holding their meetings and church and so forth. Praying that all the inhabitants of said town of Waterford, now living without the limits of the city, may be incorporated as a separate and distinct town in the state of Connecticut. The date of the incorporation, Waterford's natal day, so to speak, is October 8th, 1801. The incorporation papers here go on to describe the boundaries of Waterford. It notes that Waterford will have one representative to the General Assembly. The lists, or the taxes of each town, to be divided proportionately, and also apportion the share of the present town's poor and adjust other burdens and debts. It also mentions that the first town meeting shall be held at Darrow's Meeting House east of Niantic River on the second Tuesday of November 1801. And the warning shall be posted on the schoolhouse at Jordan Plain, which we don't know where that was. It's not the schoolhouse that's on the town green. And elsewhere as necessary, at least 5 days before. We're going to meet again at the Darrow Meeting House. But first, we're going to go back almost a couple of hundred years for some Connecticut history. The focus is going to be pretty much on politics and religion, and our goal is to get to the 1818 state constitution. Thomas Hooker, as he is imagined to have appeared, this is, I kind of got a kick out of that. I'd like to see Isaac Rogers as maybe he may have imagined to have appeared, but we don't have that. But Thomas Hooker is the father of Connecticut. He arrived in Boston from England in 1633, settled in Newtown, left for the Connecticut River Valley. Good reports on the fertile valley that it was, a navigable river and so forth. And when Windsor, Wethersfield, and Hartford joined, there was a clear need for a formal statement of fundamental law. Hooker expressed the democratic principle of government based on popular will in a 1638 sermon. From that sermon basically came the so-called fundamental orders, an orderly and decent government established according to God. And this is what we have. So this is why Connecticut's called the Constitution State, because of the Fundamental Orders, 1639. It's recognized by most historians as the first real framework of government, which pretty much is what a constitution is all about. So this is considered the fundamental orders, our first constitution, and thus the license plate. John Davenport and followers arrived in the Haven Bay in 1638, the same year that Hooker gave his sermon, to establish a Bible state. New Haven soon became the wealthiest English settlement in the 17th century America. So much for a Bible state. Soon offspring colonies, Guilford, Milford, Brantford, and Southold, Long Island, would emerge in time. I like this map of New Haven. It shows 1640, what's that say, 44? 9 squares with the square in the middle. The square in the middle was the marketplace. And today is, of course, the green, the New Haven green. So I couldn't resist.
Is south at the bottom?
Excuse me?
Is the south of the map at the bottom?
Can we save questions, actually?
Yeah, I want to know if on the map south is at the bottom.
It just wants to orient
The orientation of the
I
map.
have difficulty hearing, so.
Oh. Is the map oriented north-south,
Oh,
vertically?
I don't know.
I understand. It's a good map, though.
John Winthrop Jr., John Winthrop the Younger, the founder of the settlement, begun at Pequod River in 1648, included a government of 1 constable, 5 townsmen, 2 fence viewers and clearers of highways, and 2 overseers of weirs, the fish traps, nets. Regulations in early New London, Pequod, included the marking of cattle and impounding of cattle and swine. Winthrop, of course, had paramount authority in New London, and as we shall see. In 1600s, Richard Blinman, probably Blinman Avenue, became the minister of the Pequot plantation, and 20 families emigrated and formed the first church. I don't know what, this is an early map. There's Cape, whoops. Whoops. I still need help. All right. Well, I did have it.
Do you want me to push forward for you? I can. That easy?
The pointer. It's about.
Oh, the pointer.
Oh.
Get out of the way so I'm not blocking. Where are we pointing?
To the right, right?
Cape Cod.
Cape Cod.
The old-fashioned.
Cape Anna.
Oh,
There
right,
we go.
yeah.
Cape. Okay. Do you want me to advance the slides? Would that be easier?
No, it's-
Anna.
So anyway, things are happening in New London. It's interesting too that one of the first trades that Winthrop needed in New London was a blacksmith. And a blacksmith was contracted by Winthrop and the townsmen on very generous terms. They would build a house and shop, pay expenses, transportation, provide a half ton of iron, 20 to 30 pounds of steel, plus a house lot and upland meadow. So it really does give you an idea how important a blacksmith was. Now, unfortunately, this is a relatively new map, 1858, so-called Beers map, but it gives a little idea. New London would grow rapidly. It had probably the finest harbor in Connecticut, and what they were called a favorable agricultural hinterland as well. After 1651, planters were eager to expand the first farm at, and it's interesting, at Nahantic. We're so used to hearing about West Farms being Waterford. And in Francis Cocham's History of New London, I think only a couple times is West Farms mentioned. She uses what they used back then, that this western part of Waterford was known as Nahantic. Winthrop, of course, took the first farm in Nahantic, east of the bar and the gut. That was the Niantic River, right where it cuts through in the narrow area. He also got the ferry privilege, which was added in 1660. It was oftentimes called the ferry farm as a result. He also had the so-called Mill Pond farm in the Cohansey area, kind of the central part of the map there, and as well as the privilege of the mill stream, as well as the entire course of Alewife Brook, which of course back then was up in Quaker Hill, okay? I think we call it Hunts Brook now, I believe. Again, with privileges of erecting mills, dams, ponds, and cutting lumber. So John Winthrop the Younger really, he really had it. He really had it made. He had a monopoly, is what it comes down to. in time, he did lease the town mill, the so-called town mill in New London, to a baker from Milford by the name of James Rogers. Finally, though, it wasn't until 1709 before New London was able to get the privilege to establish another grist mill. It had all been John Winthrop up until then. The interesting thing is, though, a mill wasn't established. It was established at Jordan Brook, the falls at Jordan, which is right down the end of Mill Lane. The mill itself wasn't established until about 1732. So why there was this long delay, I don't know. But at any rate, James Rogers, who just got that we acquired the lease of the mill, town mill, became the largest landowner on the neck. That's that lower part of Waterford. The settlers, from the very start, wanted London in the name of their settlement, and it wasn't until the General Court relented in 1657-58. The General Court actually preferred Fair Harbor, but the settlers stuck with Pequot until the General Court relented. Oh, there's the town mill. Oh, a handsome dude. There was civil war in England, so-called Puritan Revolution, 1640, 1660. Charles I versus Parliament, dominated by Puritans. The nation was pretty much fractured into civil war to at least 1642. And then Oliver Cromwell, the zealous Puritan, defeated the Royalists, and Charles the First was executed. So Charles II became king after Cromwell's death in 1658. The restoration of Charles II was, of course, the end of the rule of Cromwell and the Puritans. There was a realization at that moment that the fundamental orders possessed no real authority in the eyes of the English government. The General Court chose, who else but John Winthrop, the younger, to secure a charter. He certainly was by far the best equipped in knowledge, experience, and personality to achieve that goal. So off to London goes John Winthrop the Younger, and this is what we get. The Charter of Charles II's Charter of 1662 provided a clear legal basis for the colony, united the settlements on the Connecticut River and eastern shoreline with those of New Haven. Connecticut was established as a corporation with political authority vested in a governor and an assembly elected by the freemen. The General Assembly was responsible for lawmaking, taxation and distribution. It's interesting that political authority vested in the will of the people. I don't know whether you heard King Charles, when he was here, speak of mentioning the Magna Carta, which of course goes way back, 1215, and as part of the basic English common law, which of course we in turn have established. Not always, equitably, but anyway. Let's see. Charles II, who up here, who issued the charter of 1662, dies in 1685, and James II becomes king. Now, James II of Scotland was Catholic, which of course in England at the time was an issue. Meanwhile, Governor Andros of New York, that fellow to the left there, Governor of New York, arrived in Hartford in 1687 to annex Connecticut. Fearful of having to surrender the charter, candles were extinguished, carried off under the cover of darkness, and secreted in a large hollow tree, which, as you know, eventually blew down. Meanwhile, Andros proved a despot, but the charter was saved at a meeting when Andros came to Hartford, and it was laying there on the table. It was late in the afternoon in the fall, and there were candles to light things up, and poof, all of a sudden they're gone, and the charter is gone. The tree blew down, what, in 1850 something or other, 1856. And of course, furniture's been made from it. The governor's desk, I think, has been made from that oak. Here we have William and Mary, the Glorious Revolution, 1688-89, when King James II was overthrown and was replaced by his Protestant daughter, who was over in the Netherlands, Mary II, and married to her Dutch husband, William III of Orange. And there they are, William and Mary. Meanwhile, Governor Andros has been captured and imprisoned in Boston for 10 months and shipped back to England, and Connecticut's government has been restored under William and Mary. It just seems like it's just wars, war after war after war. Following the Glorious Revolution, 1688-89, the British and the French would fight for dominance in both the Old World and the New. First there was Queen Anne's War, King William's War, Queen Anne's War, King George's War. It's just one war after another. So of course, the English and the French we'll be talking about. Back to Waterford. This is what they refer to as Fort Hill, a rocky summit down on Niles Hill and Pepperbox, that area. There's a house there now. It was converted from an old school. There was a schoolhouse there for a while. But prior to that was the so-called Pepperbox Meeting House. And the meeting house was called Pepperbox because it kind of had the look of a pepperbox. It was for both First and Seventh-day Baptists, built in 1730 on this rocky summit called Fort Hill. Elder Gorton was the minister of the Baptist congregation. He was finally removed after some time. The congregation dispersed and the building was eventually torn down. Meanwhile, the Seventh-dayers continued, and they, of course, built a church on Great Neck Road. The Great Awakening in the 1730s, 1740s, a division within the Puritan Congregational Church. The New Lights, the Old Lights, the New Lights, a lot of personal spontaneity in their beliefs. The Old Lights were conservative. In 1748, a Baptist church was organized in the Nahantic district, and that's on the left there, the site of the Darrow Meeting House on Mullen Hill Road, and again was referred to as Nahantic. Nathan Howard was ordained the elder, and it was organized from the Society of Congregational Separates. Meanwhile, another small group organized by Noah Hammond down by the Fenger Brook area, as far as I know. It was kind of on the outer edges of New London. Zadok Darrow was ordained deacon, and they joined, Darrow joined the Nahantic Church here in 1777. The frame of the uncompleted church, Noah Hammond's church in the Fenger Brook area, was re-erected, and this is which you have here, the so-called Darrow Meeting House, which was completed by 1778. And they had a pretty good congregation. By 1794, there were up to 250 members. The building itself was eventually torn down in 1848, and the Baptists built another church in Jordan Village. Back to the French and the British. The 7 Years' War, or what we know of as the French and Indian War, was the largest struggle yet between England and France, with European diplomatic mastery and colonial supremacy at stake. The two mobilized themselves once again for the 7 Years' War. There was a heavy demand in Connecticut for soldiers. New London responded. 1 in 5 Connecticut males, in fact, between 16 and 45 responded. Frances Calkins, in her History of New London, cites Jonathan Latimer, Jr., captain of a militia, and John Rogers, a lieutenant. And of course, there was lots of opportunity in New London, especially for privateers. While the war was going on, there was always somebody opting, looking for a deal somewhere. Treaty of Paris finally confirmed Britain's triumph in America, stripping everything France except for a few islands. Britain ruled over a third of North America, a number of Caribbean islands, the Western Mediterranean, posts in Senegal, on the west coast of Africa, and in India and Sumatra. So England really has come out of this. So, Connecticut was in pretty tough economic straits after the war, after the French and Indian War. So Great Britain decided to ease her imperial burdens by passing some revenue-raising measures. The Sugar Act of 1764 came first, cut off trade with French and Spanish islands, which for Connecticut was a major source of specie, that trade. Britain responded with the Stamp Act, 1765, direct tax on licenses, newspapers, and legal documents. Not only were Connecticut residents enraged with the mother country, but at each other. The opinion west of the Connecticut River, and this is important, generally was that Connecticut should resign itself to the tax and just be happy under Mother England. There weren't any Baptists, I'll tell you, at least not many, west of the Connecticut River. East of the river, of course, the population was seething with rage with these taxes. There was a demonstration in New London in 1765 in August. The effigy of Jared Ingersoll, who was the distributor of the stamps, was hanged from a tree. There were also protests in Norwich, Wyndham, and Lebanon. The effigy was hanged. This prompted the organization, the Sons of Liberty. Men organized to repudiate the Tory Western leaders and elect patriotic leaders from Eastern Connecticut. So again, you got this divide between East and West, just in the state of Connecticut. The election of 1766 was a major triumph. It brought Eastern Connecticut into control of the government. Jonathan Trumbull, who you see here, and his wife, was the vice governor
Next slide, Bob.
initially. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, Jonathan became governor on his own in 1769 and all the way through the Revolutionary War until he died in 1784. The painting is by his son, John Trumbull, oil, and but Trumbull himself, and this again, the religion, it comes in, it's convinced that he was doing, as governor, that he was doing the Lord's work. The Stamp Act was finally repealed, and then, lo, in 1767, the Townshend duties enacted duties on British imports. The Sons of Liberty organized plans for non-importation of British goods and non-consumption of British goods. That wasn't repealed until 1770, except for the tax on tea. And you know what happens next. Boston Tea Party, December 1773. The First Continental Congress called for support of Massachusetts. The England, Britain subsequently passed the Coercive Acts in 1774, closing the port of Boston. So things are heating up here. Lexington and Concord, April 1775. Let's see. There were some 3,600 men, Sons of Liberty and militiamen from Connecticut, joined the Patriot Force at Cambridge. Included the militia company under Major Jonathan Latimer of, I believe he was of the Waterford part. And meanwhile, the New London town records were committed to the charge of George Douglas in Waterford, just because of what was going on. I mean, New London was clearly being a port town and not well defended, thought it would be best to take the records out to Waterford. Let's see, there was, in addition to recommending fortifications at Winthrop's Neck and Groton Heights, also recommended for Mammacoke Island, up in the north of Benham Avenue in Quaker Hill. None of those fortifications ever happened. As you probably know from your history, that the conditions that Washington endured and his troops at Valley Forge were just almost unbearable. The men were hungry, lacked clothes, and let's see. It's interesting too that some of that indifference, there was some indifference to George Washington's fate down there by some pretty selfish patriots. The citizens themselves, many suspected state governments. State governments were fearful of congressional power. Congress feared the possibility of military aristocracy, so that the revolution wasn't this we're all in by any stretch of the imagination. This picture, by the way, shows Washington and Lafayette at Valley Forge. Whoops. This is Lafayette. The Treaty of Alliance was signed with France in 1778. France would end up donating $8 million and more than 9,000 troops to the cause. This is Lafayette. Can you believe he was 19 years old?
Oh, what?
19 years old. And Washington immediately, he became a brigadier general at 19. Okay. In In the end, though, enough Americans would sacrifice time, property, and lives for a victory. Connecticut did end up having a distinguished record for supplying troops, weapons, and provisions for Washington's army. Connecticut is sometimes referred to as the provision state. Of course, in 1781, backing up just a wee bit, the Arnolds invasion of New London. This is where the unbounded hospitality of Waterford farmers really shined. General Miller up in Quaker Hill, for example, prepared food, fed everybody, and a lot of the escaping New Londoners found help in Waterford. The signing of the treaty finally. Connecticut, meanwhile, is still plodding along with the same charter, except, of course, by this time there's no reference to the king, the 1662 charter. Pretty much in Connecticut, you had the same leaders, or at least the same types of leaders, who had controlled both church and state before the war, were still pretty much in power after the war. The so-called standing order, that combination of the Congregational Church, which was the established church in Connecticut, and the Federalist political majority, the so-called standing order. And they're going to be around pretty much until 1818. Let's see. Okay, peace treaty. In 1793, there were grants of land, the so-called firelands, which you can see on the map. Now, the firelands were part of the Western Reservation belonging to the state of Connecticut, and they were for the fire sufferers of places like New London. They were specifically for those people. So that's where the term, the firelands, comes from Arnold's invasion. There were 9 coastal towns, including New London. They were allocated about 500,000 acres, but this isn't new. In fact, the firelands, what was it, 1793, it's just a little too late, really, for the efforts in what Connecticut suffered, especially in New London area and Waterford. Let's see. Oh. Connecticut was a great place to leave. There just wasn't enough tillable land. There just wasn't the families, Connecticut families. I mean, 4, 5, 6 kids was not unusual at all. The population in 1810 of Waterford was 2,185. In 1850, 40 years later, it was 2,259. That's just 74 more people in 40 years. People were leaving. They were going west. Oh, I should point out, I'll just get up. Well, of course, you had Cleveland, which is on this map. Moses Cleveland was from Canterbury, I believe, and a surveyor. And he went out there and did a lot of surveying. And then a local guy. Right here, the town of Warren. Moses Warren was from, well, really Waterford, but after 1639, that part of Waterford became East Lyme. So East Lyme claims Moses Warren, but what the heck. When he left the Western lands, come back to Connecticut, he did write a poem called The Explorer's Farewell. Then rouse ye, men whose native soil eludes your most laborious toil, with scanty crops and blast far in the west, your works renew. The Western student shall outdo the schools of Yale and Harvard, to and on the pendants trample. Alexis de Tocqueville, a Frenchman who toured the U.S. in 1830s, early 30s, noted that in 1831, a quarter of the House of Representatives were men born in Connecticut, and a third of the United States Senate, men born in Connecticut. Okay. All right, the Constitutional Convention. One of the major, very important spokesmen, not only in Connecticut, but nationally, was Noah Webster, the dictionary guy. Very bright guy. But as long as the 13 states, because keep in mind we were under the so-called Articles of Confederation, which, you know, the states really ran their own individual shows. Let's see. Noah Webster said there must be a supreme, this is a quote, power at the head of the Union, vested with authority to make laws that respect the states in general and to compel obedience to those laws. Unless a president and Congress have the power to compel obedience to the laws, the Union will not be of long duration. So he was speaking for a very strong federal government. So you probably may remember Roger Sherman. He was, it was only 10 days before the convention started that delegates were chosen from Connecticut. William Samuel Johnson, Oliver Ellsworth, and this guy, Roger Sherman. Sherman, as you may remember, was responsible for the so-called Connecticut Compromise, which, when there was discussion about representation, the House, or excuse me, the Senate would be made up, every state would have 2 senators, okay? And the House, of course, was proportionate. Washington is inaugurated in 1789. Division soon developed between those, the Federalists, Washington, and the Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson advocated suffrage reform. He felt that as long as you were a citizen, you should be allowed to vote. Property qualifications should be abolished. Jefferson, on the one hand, feared a too strong government and that would serve the rich rather than the interests of the common people. Should also add that this is 1789, you've got the French Revolution going on. That, in turn, was a very divisive issue. The Republicans were, of course, seeing, a sister republic in revolutionary France. The Federalists only saw anarchy and violence. Let's see. So forth, tax border. The resentment against the so-called standing order that I mentioned earlier grew mainly among the Baptists and the Methodists. The Assembly, in an attempt to control, or rather to give a break, rather, to the Baptists and Methodists, passed a so-called certificate law, saying that any Christian attending non-congregational church was not obligated to pay a tax. But of course, you were branded a certificate man and looked upon with contempt. And if a Baptist lived too far to attend regularly meetings, he still had to pay. Move on here. Alien and Sedition Act. 1798. This, of course, is your New London history. Charles Holt, who was editor of the New London Bee, was arrested for using the Bee to harshly criticize Adams' administration. Meanwhile, Charles Holt found that it was tough selling papers because the Federalists controlled the major newspaper, the Connecticut Gazette, and they wouldn't, if you were found advertising in the Bee, chances are you might have difficulty getting a job. So Charles Holt was his paper only lasted from 1797 to 1802, and of course he was arrested. He was convicted of sedition under the Sedition Act, 3 months in prison and a heavy fine, and of course that's a controversy that is really with us today. First contested presidential campaign between these two fellows, Jefferson, of course, the election of 1800. Jefferson called it the Revolution of 1800. The Republicans launched a full-scale campaign. The Federalists, though, in Connecticut, won out. They voted for John Adams, but Jefferson did win a majority of the votes, and he meant what he said in his keynote address. He said, "We're all Republicans, we're all Federalists." He was probably more aggressive in replacing federal employees in Connecticut due to the state government's own purge of Republicans from local offices. There was only one controversy of an appointment, and that was down in New Haven. The General Assembly passed in 1801. This is in the same session that Waterford's incorporation took place. That was in October 1801. The so-called stand-up law, which meant that if when you voted, you had to stand up or raise your hand. And of course, if you were a Republican, you were marked right there. So, same old. The Federalists, year after year, tended to get re-elected in Connecticut. But meanwhile, nationally, in 1804, the second election, Jefferson carried every state except Connecticut and Delaware. In Connecticut, in fact, there was even some discussion of forming a Northern Confederacy, but nothing came of that. Let's see. Jefferson and Adams are amazingly, were very close. I mean, they were politically, like this, but they remained friends long after they got out of politics. And amazingly, they both died on July 4th in 26. So this July 4th will be the 200th anniversary, so-called, of the deaths of those two men. Boy. I'm gonna have to skip some stuff here. It's just, let's go back to the first town meeting. At the incorporation, they said that Waterford would meet at the Darrow's Meeting House, and let's see where. That's that. Well, one thing I have to mention though is. All right, this is a political cartoon slamming Jefferson's embargo. This was Jefferson's idea of securing peace by simply not trading. And of course, Jefferson kind of felt like everybody should be a farmer. That was his idea of a good, healthy way to make a living. And so I won't go through this, but it's a slam on Jefferson. And at a town meeting in March 1809, the town meeting of Waterford. Now here we are in a state where Jefferson is he's not a Federalist. And the town meeting, again, I won't read it. You can go into town hall, the vault, and read this stuff. But supporting our valuable Constitution. town meeting went a great length, which I'm gonna have to skip. But it's important that, again, there's Waterford, little Waterford, towing the Republican line when the state is pretty much Federalist. In, let's see. Okay. Let's see. Madison, when he became president, he passed these so-called coercive acts. Again, Connecticut was not supposed to be trading. There was, of course, a lot of privateering going on. But Jefferson, when economic coercion acts didn't work, he called for war, the so-called War of 1812. The war was unpopular. The country wasn't prepared for it. Of course, the Hartford Convention, meeting of New England delegates, they considered forming or seceding from the Union. But eventually the treaty again was signed, and the war was over. Just real quick, the first town meeting going back to November of 1801 by the special order of the General Assembly, which was in the incorporation papers. And here are the different offices: the selectmen, the constables, fence viewers, listers, and so forth, surveyors of highways, and again, you can go to town hall and read this stuff. Okay. Oh, also in the next meeting of, in the early April of 1802, the town meeting did pass some laws about the swine, sheep, and geese going at large. Basically, back then, a fence was to keep the animals out. But as long as the swine, you know, had a ring, and in their nose, and the cattle were branded and so forth, you were pretty much okay, except boars. Boars, of course, weren't allowed to be running around. I like this one. This is the branding of the sheep, and this is how they did it. They did these cuts in the ears, you know, and the second one down, a cut down in the left ear, and a cut across in the right ear, and so on and so on and so on. And there were several pages of this. One of the things they had to do early on was taking care of the poor that belonged to the town of Waterford, that were in New London, in the division. And I blocked out last names, because probably some of you have a relative. That might be up there. These were in not the town meeting minutes, but in the so-called town book, which was the selectmen's book. Very soon after that, the selectmen appointed 15 so-called overseers, which would be appointed every year or reappointed every year. And overseers were paid for expenses to oversee poor or disadvantaged people. Okay, and here's a little snapshot of Waterford, listing all the so-called polls, voters. There was a voter tax, and these are all different. My God, you know, steers and heifers. A horse, 3 years old. Horse, 2 years old. Horse, 1 year old. I mean, they really broke it down. All the different land, acres of boggy meadow mowed, others of boggy meadow not mowed, so forth. Anyway, just all this stuff. It's fascinating for people like me. And this is the various, this is again a snapshot, 1809, of Waterford. You know, tavern keepers, what are there, 6 of them. Merchants, traders, half a dozen. Grist mills, only 5. Fulling mills, 2. Notice Moses Warren, the surveyor we talked about, had a fulling mill out at what is now East Lyme, where the Latimer Brook, the falls that come into the head, that's where that was. Sawmills, a couple of sawmills. Although there were lots of sawmills prior to 1809. Blacksmiths, 3 shop, so forth. Tanners, coopers, wheelwrights, so forth. A snapshot of Waterford in 1809. Fortunately, we have that. What's unfortunate is we don't have any other years until the assessor's records. There were a few starting in the 1870s, but that's pretty much it for the old. And finally, the Constitution. 1818, Oliver Wolcott was elected. Really a man of, well, he was a former Federalist, he was a Congregationalist, and you know, he became governor, and it's interesting that he was able to rise above and see that Connecticut needed a true constitution. We had no separation of powers under the, keep in mind the charter of 1662 was what we had up until 1818. At any rate, he is to be commended for rising above the riffraff. The Constitution was ratified October 5th, 1818 by a vote of 13,918 to 12,364. So it was close, a 53% majority that a constitution was adopted. How did Waterford vote? 72 to 3. in favor of the Constitution. Okay, that's it. Any questions? It's getting kind of late for me, but if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to, about anything, really. Yes, sir?
Any idea why they called it Waterford?
Yeah, it had nothing to do with Ireland, okay? And it was basically because, if you think back to that map, you know, between the major rivers, the Thames River and the Niantic River, you know, you have all these little streams that need to be forded. And it was, what's his name? Rogers.
James, John.
Isaac.
Who?
James.
Isaac, thanks.
No.
See what happens when you get, at any rate. Yeah, Isaac Rogers was considered the father of Waterford, and he was the one responsible for coming up with that name.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Do you know the location of any bog iron mills?
Any what?
Bog iron production facilities, for instance?
Oh, the guy behind you could probably tell you more about that.
Okay.
Want me to do it now?
Well, real quick, okay?
The first bog iron mill,
Loud, please, so that everybody can hear. She asked about bog iron.
the first bog iron mill was in Montville, it wasn't in Waterford. It was up on, if you go up Lathrop Road, which used to be the North London Turnpike, and where the Korea tachometer mill, that's where the first sawmill for Waterford was, and New London, and the first bog iron mill.
And the purpose of a bog, iron bog, what are we looking for here? Why are we looking for?
Because I'm a local historian and I'm interested.
Good answer.
Well,
What does it mean?
It's
yeah, what's it mean?
Governor Winthrop, John Winthrop, that we talked about this a few minutes ago, started the first sawmill and a bog iron mill, and it didn't last more than a year.
If you're talking about further, closer to the.
But a bog iron mill, what was it for?
Baker's history.
Look, let's cut the private conversation. We
Bog
can talk
iron,
later.
when water flows over marshland, it grabs iron from the plants and attaches the iron to the rocks chemically. And so what they do is they have people that go out and they poke through the mud with an iron rod, and if they hit something and it chips away, they'll take it out and it looks greenish brown. And they chip that stuff off or melt it, and it becomes the basis for iron.
So the source was, we're looking for iron. Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Feel free to leave, by the way. Okay, thank you.